Well, hello, everyone. This is Data-Driven Formula One with Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Ganna. Hello, all. Nice to discuss today's episode. As we already spoke a little bit before, it may be longer than the race itself.
Yeah, I think this might be the shortest episode for us.
Yeah,
because kind of not much happened, and I think in terms of analytics, there's not much to do. But I mean, I guess like one thing that I thought we could discuss, considering what happened with the Spa race, is extreme weather and when extreme weather affected races. So we kind of blend history and the current season and have a look at it.
exactly. We will speak a lot about the weather today.
Yeah.
But first, to something completely different. We are data-driven F1, and of course we will speak a lot about data, but especially if you discuss events like Spa-Francorchamps or also the original Nürburgring. I found here a nice fitting quote by Albert Einstein, who once said, "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." Until some years ago, Spa-Francorchamps was part of the Belgian public roads, so everybody could drive the circuit, including you could drive up the famous curves, and this is really something completely different than seeing it on TV. And especially today we will speak about the weather. I mean, if you followed social media, people may be saying that in the 1970s the race would have started, that today's racers are not the same as 30 years ago. But it's of course quite easy to say if you're sitting on the sofa with your Coke, with your beer, with your potato chips. But really, even if you are driving with your private car around Spa-Francorchamps, you get a complete different experience, perception about this really particular racetrack. And we discussed it many times before. It's really one of the most dangerous tracks, which we still have up to today in our annual agenda. And maybe one of the last old-fashioned racetracks. And I mean, the race didn't really started on Sunday, but we saw, I think it was on Friday, when we had the accident in the female W series. So it really shows how dangerous it is. And of course, we also had the accident from Lando Norris. So it's really a very dangerous racetrack. You may see it on TV when it goes up and down, but really, even if you drive in a normal speed with your private car, you get a complete different experience, and you have a much higher respect if you think that really people have to be completely crazy going there with full speed.
Yeah, I just want to say that Spa-Francorchamps is a very special track because we've discussed many times previously with Patrick that, in the wet conditions, we normally see the driving ability at its best because all cars slow down, and naturally, if you're an inferior car, you have a chance to win the race, even if your car is not fantastic. And one of the kind of peculiarities of Belgian Grand Prix is that it rains very often, or you are very often in wet conditions. It's not, so I'm kind of surprised to see the headlines that, okay, this is like the worst possible kind of Grand Prix in the history of Formula One. Well, this could be argued. So certainly, I think one of the things that happened this year, it wasn't so terribly exciting, but considering, torrential rains and rainy weather and having a red flagged race. This is not a very unique event, and today we will look at several of those events, and you will see how many of them there were, and actually how many of them took place in Belgium before. So in that sense, it's not that unique.
Exactly, and just to finish it, as I mentioned, it was part of the public road, including the famous Eau Rouge, but today I haven't been there since then, but I think the actual racetrack today, it's not part of public road, only the old part of Spa. Mm-hmm. So just if you are near the place and want to visit it. Another photo, surprisingly, in the rain.
Yeah. So that's Michael Schumacher.
Yeah. Already 30 years ago, when he had his first Grand Prix, quite surprisingly, because the regular driver for the Jordan team at that time was Bertrand Gachot. But he had an incident in UK the year before, where he used some, I think, defense spray, this pepper sprays, and due to this spent a time in a British jail, and due to this couldn't sit inside the Jordan. So Michael Schumacher got the opportunity, as he was already quite successful in the sports car series, driving for Mercedes-Benz. And as we all remember, he pretty much used his opportunity, becoming, I think it was 9th in his very first Grand Prix.
Yeah, so I mean, we will look at some of these Grand Prix with Michael Schumacher, and even if we recall the fatal incident with Ayrton Senna, it was also in bad weather conditions, and Michael Schumacher was driving. So we will look at that. Yeah,
exactly. But as promised, we will speak a lot about weather. So I've went to our webpage, worldweatheronline.com. So here you can get weather information from all over the planet for today, tomorrow, and way back in the past. By the way, quite interesting if you're doing some kind of investigations. You can practically still find weather data from the start of the 1900s. I know I did it for my book about Enzo Ferrari, where I wanted to find out how had been the weather condition, as there's also some kind of story about his birth, as he was only registered one day after the birth. Okay, but back to the weather in Spa-Francorchamps. Nearest city is Liège, how it is spelled in French, as it's the French part of Belgium. For example, in German, it would be Lüttich. Liège is part of the triangle between Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. Liège on the Belgium side, Maastricht on the Dutch side, and Aachen in the German part. So here I didn't got the weather information particularly for Spa-Francorchamps, but I used the one from Liège. So you see here the weather from the last 12 years, 2021 to 29. So you see, as you remember, this weekend rainy, but it was also raining in 2018, in 2015, 2011, and 2010.
Practically every year.
Exactly.
And when it was not raining, it was most of the time cloudy and probably wet from the previous day.
Attention, this is the historical weather for the 27th of August. This is not the historical weather for the last Grand Prix, but to make it easy, I just looked how the August 27 have been over the years. Mm-hmm. Also interesting, you see here complete different temperatures from, let me see, 15 degrees Celsius in 2015 to 32 degrees Celsius in 2019. So practically you can have everything nearly from winter to summer. Of course, some people also got the idea why we're having this in August, why we're not doing this, let's say, in May or June. For this, I also checked shortly how was the weather this year. So in May 16th, 2021, it was 13 degrees Celsius, raining. June 20, it was a little bit warmer, 20 C, but also raining. In July, it was better, 24 Celsius, sunny, but this was in the middle of the summer break, so not a feasible date. But so you see, and I mean, Spa-Francorchamps is in Belgium in the Ardennes, which is practically a part of the same mountains, which are known in Germany as Eifel. And in Eifel, we have the Nürburgring. So the weather conditions in Spa and in Francorchamps, in Spa-Francorchamps and at the Nürburgring are quite similar regarding how much you can predict them, meaning quite unpredictable.
Yeah, and considering the predictability, it actually is a job of much of the analytics team to actually predict when exactly the rain is going to start. And or what would be the conditions throughout the race, and whichever team is able to better predict that, that team normally has a better strategy for the race, because obviously you want to make your tire decisions based on your understanding of what the weather is going to be like. So you don't want to be obviously in wet tires too early or too late. So so the weather considerations are extremely important, and the analytics team is doing usually a stellar job at trying to predict, but it's like Patrick said, it's very difficult to predict, despite the fact, so you probably know that it will be raining, but when exactly it will start to rain, that's a big question. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Formula
so let's look at
extreme weather.
Yeah, so let's look at extreme weather. Well, generally, I mean, I just looked at all the red flagged races. So these are the races that were red flagged and restarted. And so what do I mean by restarted? It means that they kind of restarted and were completed to the end, like you would normally do. But basically, yeah, even if we look kind of at the history, you can see in the 87, we had a Belgian Grand Prix that was red flagged, and we had Alain Prost as the winner. And if you go to the next page, there will be kind of a second batch of them that were red flagged and restarted. And again, here we have two more Belgian Grand Prix in 1990 and 1998. So that's both of these again were happening in Belgium. So
exactly, and both are multiple crashes. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is the racetrack due to its constructs. I mean, it practically is provoking this bigger multiple crashes, often directly after the start. I said, due to me, it's a little bit a track which is a little bit out of time when you see it in comparison to the other racetracks. It's really quite old-fashioned, and we have to be honest, it's really dangerous also for the drivers. And we saw this on Friday. We saw it some years ago regarding the fatal accident we had in Formula 2. So it's really up to today a very dangerous racetrack.
Yeah, so if we go next, we will actually look at the races that were not restarted, because I think the argument in the news was that it was so the current race that we just had in the Spa only so the drivers only completed 25% of the race, in fact. And there was an argument, that didn't happen ever. Well, surprise. These are basically all the races that did not restart. In terms of so as you can see, Spa from 2021 is not there, but it's because first it was resumed and then it did not restart kind of on the second batch. So, but if you look at this picture and if you look for the reason why the races were kind of not restarting and finishing early, then it's almost overwhelmingly, apart from Brazilian Grand Prix in 2003, and the Spanish Grand Prix in 1975, the reason was. Apologies, let me just get it right. 1971 Canadian, 1975 Spanish, 1990 Portuguese, and 1997 Canadian Grand Prix, and 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix. So the overwhelming majority of these races actually had rain or torrential rain. Or some weather conditions, like for example mist, which is also like natural reason why the rain didn't start. So essentially, the majority of these races, they were affected by extreme weather, and so and that didn't restart. So it did happen before.
But nevertheless, I think there's a let's say a reason why yesterday or the weekend it was unique, because it was not restarted, but it was practically never started. I mean, they just have been driving.
Yeah, but that happened before as well. So if again so these are just the races that were not restarted. But again, if we look at resumed ones, what do I mean by resumed? So resumed race is when you when you stop the race, but then you are trying to resume it with the exact standings of the cars that kind of stopped it in certain ways. So again, here we have a Belgian Grand Prix, as you can see in 1981. And again, like you can see how many laps we've completed. So in 1979 we had the South African Grand Prix with only 2 laps, and again Belgian Grand Prix with 2 laps, and then it was resumed and completed to 54 laps. So again, again in Belgium we had this. So actually, the latest 2021 race was basically 2 laps first and then 4 laps second. So here we do have, even in this table, you can see that there are only 2 laps completed in South Africa, 3 laps in Korea in 2010. So it's all kind of very, very reminiscent. And actually, I remember this magnificent Canadian Grand Prix in 2011 when Jenson Button won a Canadian Grand Prix. I remember watching it with my friends. And I remember that it took the entire day because, like, we decided that we're gonna watch it like in the afternoon, and then it was way into the night because of the time gap when I was in England, and it practically took 24 hours to watch because it was also never starting. It was kind of starting and stopping. It was really, really rainy. The weather conditions were absolutely crazy, but I guess where this current Spa race was different is just it was incredibly boring because I remember that despite kind of all this weather problems in Canada in 2011, the race was quite exciting because you would look at all, the safety car and what was happening and all the discussions, and then, let's do it again kind of thing. So it's all, so it was all very, quite an event. But I think, in this case, it was just, let's just cancel it. So in that sense, it was just not as exciting as some of the events we had previously. But on the other hand, I think it's great that currently they're able to call races off like that, because it's it's very expensive. Any race is a very expensive event, right? And so as we discussed Niki Lauda a lot, and if you watched the film Ayrton Senna, you could see kind of direct speech from Niki Lauda there. And this is actually what he was arguing, that if you have torrential rain, you should just stop the race, and you should say, okay, well, we're not racing because it's just not safe, right? People can die. Drivers can die, and they can die in these conditions. And yeah, so in that sense, I think it's a great progress that they are just saying, we call it off. Yeah. So this one is basically resumed. Yeah, this one is these ones are resumed, and then there are some more here. And again, so the ones that were resumed, again, we have here the Belgian Grand Prix in 2016. So here we don't have a heavy rain, but we did have a crash as a sort of reason, an event for red flagging. And again, you can see that there are other events on this page where we only have completed like 1 lap or 2 laps. And I remember, I don't know, Patrick, if you remember this, the 2014 Japanese race where there was a typhoon fanfare basically in Japan, and Lewis Hamilton emerged as a winner. But yeah, there was also a problem with starting that race, and only 2 laps were initially completed.
Of course, we had a fatal accident by Jules Bianchi, which again underlines what we discussed. Racing in the rain is indeed very dangerous, and we saw this all over the history of Formula One. So there's, as you said, there are good reasons to not start such a race. Yeah, so and I also want to pay your attention and our viewers' attention and listeners' attention to the fact that even if you just look at this part of the table, you will see that there were two Grand Prix on this page that only had 1 lap completed, which was British Grand Prix in 2014 and Bahrain Grand Prix in 2020. And then we also had the British Grand Prix in 2021, and Hungarian Grand Prix was only 2 laps. So when it was red flagged, and again, even though it was resumed and then completed, it's not it's not uncommon, let's just say, to have this type of situation. So and again, you can see that there is Belgium there on the list. I think there's also shortened races, and this is why this current race is in this particular table and not in the previous table, because in addition to being red flagged, in addition to being sort of stopped, it resumed, but then it was shortened, and then it was also not restarted. So in that sense, yes, I mean, there is some uniqueness to the situation. But in a sense, it's again not totally unique. And like I said before, even if you look at this table, we had basically Italian Grand Prix in 78 and French Grand Prix in 98, where there was only 1 lap completed, and San Marino Grand Prix, where famously we had Ayrton Senna as the winner, was also shortened, and also there were only 4 laps. So it's essentially, not a unique situation. So we, in the end, we can say that in the Belgian Grand Prix this year, the drivers were able to complete 6 laps, and that's not overall not the shortest race in the history of Formula One. And luckily it was not shortened due to an accident. Let's say race management predicted a high risk for such accidents, and due to this shortened it before it came to a crash, as you in opposite, let's say, to what we see here on these different slides.
Yeah, and this is the moment that I wanted to come back to when we talked about Michael Schumacher in this table. That if you're watching us on YouTube, you see the table where there is 1994 San Marino Grand Prix where Ayrton Senna lost his life and Michael Schumacher emerged as a winner. Again, before the race was red flagged, they only completed 7 laps of the race. So it basically, again, some evidence and data that we have that shows that it's not a unique situation to have shortened race, and this was not the shortest race in the history by no means. But if you look at it, we practically in each table we have Belgian Grand Prix present in one way or the other. Probably we didn't have Belgian Grand Prix in not restarted, but considering that we have current Belgian Grand Prix that was not restarted, so we can say that even in that table, in the initial table, we do also have an example of Belgian Grand Prix being there. Of course, Max Verstappen emerged as a winner of the race, but it was not much of a race. No disrespect to Max Verstappen, great driver, and it was so I'm glad that there is some intrigue to the season, as we saw before with Hungarian Grand Prix. But I mean, it's it's a pity when you're not able to fully enjoy the entire Grand Prix. But on the other hand, I'm glad that they have the courage now to say we're not going to proceed and we will just see that people are safe, and we're just going to call it off because of the weather.
I agreed to this. So we had Max Verstappen as the winner, and also quite funny, you may say, we had Nikita Mazepin with the fastest lap. I mean, quite surprising. It may be the first, maybe the last time he will achieve this. Who knows? But also, I mean, who would have thought this before the weekend?
Yeah, quite a unique situation. But at the same time, I think not much changed in the stable since we last spoke, so it's quite similar.
Yes, I must look it up if he got a point for this or not. I mean, normally with having the fastest lap, you get 1 point. So maybe he got now half a point. I would have to look it up, to be honest.
Yeah, because they awarded half points, so probably was a discount of some sort. But nevertheless, I mean, this is the stats in terms of team duels, and as you can see, not much has changed.
No, pretty much the same. As we are nearly in September, I marked here in green all drivers from whom we think that they have a contract for the next season, which is pretty much that they would stay in their team. So we see some pretty interesting people who still not decided how they continue, or better said, the team not have decided yet. Of course, everybody is discussing Valtteri Bottas, and to be honest, this weekend not really helped him, especially with the good result from George Russell, which practically announced himself again as the potential number 2 for the Mercedes team. So it's, if he continues like this, I mean, it will be more and more difficult for Mercedes to not sign him. So let's say if this is, if we know where, if Bottas stays or will go somewhere, then the whole roulette will start. Of course, also interesting if Kimi will decides to continue or not, because this would also mean a position at Alfa Romeo would be free, and we have some very talented people like Pierre Gasly of course, Mick Schumacher, which is part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. So I think this will be still quite interesting discussions the next weeks and months.
Yeah, I just want to also say about something about George Russell, because he came second in this current Grand Prix. He's kind of in between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And last year with Patrick, we actually discussed how he's like really this underrated talent, but he managed to win the online kind of formula. So the gaming formula last year.
Yeah.
So, and we were saying how, like, this guy's actually very good. And he seems to be, because he's in Williams, we don't get to see him much, but it's good to see that he came second. So again, highlights the driving ability, and again highlights the fact that if you are in inferior car in wet conditions, you actually have a chance to be on the podium, which is I think really cool feature of Formula One.
Yes, and it also underlines that today you need maybe other skills than still 10 years ago. Now you don't only need the natural speed, but also you may have to understand how to use the information from the simulator. And maybe the car itself, as more and more electronic is included, maybe a car today is a little bit more similar than inside a simulation than, of course, the car from 1950, which was all manual, no electronics. However, so it maybe also show a little bit that today you need other skills to become successful.
Yes, and on that happy note, we come to the end of this episode.
Yeah.
As we said, this is probably the shortest episode we've done. Well, actually, we haven't done that badly, but so it's one of the shorter episodes that we have done. But I just want to remind you that our main platform is YouTube, where you can also see the presentation that we prepare for you. But thanks to Patrick, we're also present on at all other social media and platforms. Yeah. And you can also listen to us there. Yeah.
Okay.
With that, I just want to say goodbye, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. See you or listen to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.